The jungle on southern Bougainville blurs into ocean and cloud, a green sheet torn by ridges and inlets. It is 18th of April 1943, and the man in the window seat of a sleek, glass-nosed bomber is the most famous sailor in Japan. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto checks his watch, a habit as precise as a metronome. The plan reads like a train schedule. Depart Rabaul at 06, Odichus, land near Ballale, Buin around 09:45. Inspect forward bases, return by evening. Below, the coast near Moila Point and jungle north of Buin wait in indifferent silence. Above and beyond the haze, American fighters, invisible and on time, are converging from Guadalcanal, each wing carrying the arithmetic that makes this ambush possible. 330 gal on one pylon, 165 gal on the other, plus internal fuel, just enough for 1,020 of flight and a few fierce minutes of combat. He cannot know that a coded Navy message, his itinerary, times and route, was broken by U.S. codebreakers days earlier. He cannot see 18 P-38G Lightnings scalpel their way around the Solomon Islands chain, deliberately avoiding coast watchers and radar pickets by flying a 600-mile dogleg in radio silence. He cannot hear Major John W. Mitchell counting seconds behind an oxygen mask, or aggressor and top cover elements sliding into the sky's geometry to meet a target at 09:34:09:36. The Admiral believes he is making a morale trip. The Americans are making a math problem come true. On the jungle floor, a Catholic mission's ruins sit quiet. In an hour, searchers will follow smoke columns into the trees and write that the famous man's body sat upright beneath a tree, a white-gloved hand still curled around a sword hilt. But for now, it is only vibration, the drone of twin engines, and the sense, felt by both hunter and hunted, that time has narrowed to a slit in the morning. Here's the thesis, clean and sharp. The Imperial Japanese Navy planned with spirit, punctuality, audacity, and the prestige of a visiting commander who had shocked America at Pearl Harbor. The Americans planned with system, signals intelligence to know the route, long-range fighters with mismatched drop tanks to reach the intercept, and disciplined timing to turn Yamamoto's punctuality into vulnerability. The Japanese trusted the same clarity that had carried them through early victories in 1941–42, a fast approach, escorts, and secrecy. The Americans built an ambush that required all three pieces, intelligence, reach, and execution, within a +1 minute window. What they believed was this: an admiral's visit would stiffen resolve and frighten the enemy with the message that the combined fleet still ruled the South Pacific. What happened was this. Codebreakers turned a schedule into a kill chain. Logisticians turned fuel into miles. And pilots turned a narrow window into 2 downed bombers and the end of a central strategic mind. The contrast is not romantic. It is the math of dominance, the uncomfortable arithmetic of modern war, where a watch and a drop tank matter as much as courage. The Solomons campaign in early 1943 is an attritional vice. Guadalcanal is secure but ragged. Airfields sprout like coral outcrops across New Georgia and Bougainville. Japan has to hold a forward arc, from Rabaul down through the shortlands, to protect lines of communication and slow the Allied march. The U.S. now fields the 13th Air Force and naval aviation in depth. Radar sites and coast watchers feed a growing picture of daily traffic. Into that picture comes Yamamoto's itinerary. Depart Rabaul 06:00. Arrive Ballale around 09:45. Inspect units who'd claimed heavy American losses, then a boat trip to Shortland and back. Yamamoto's presence signals to subordinates that the combined fleet is watching, and to the Americans that a rare, high-value target will be in the open for minutes. The stakes are tangled. Removing Yamamoto risks hardening Japanese resolve. Yet U.S. leaders remember Pearl Harbor and fear his operational agility. They debate the ethics of a targeted strike, decide it is lawful under the customs of war. The Admiral is a uniformed commander en route to operational bases, and approve Operation Vengeance. The task flows to 13th Fighter Command and the 347th Fighter Group at Henderson Field. Build a flight that can fly farther than Navy or Marine fighters can. Arrive on time and fight its way home. From the Japanese side, the doctrine seems logical. 2 Mitsubishi G4M1 Betty bombers would carry Yamamoto and Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki with staff, escorted by 6 A6M3 Zeros from the 204th Kokutai. The Betty is fast for a twin-engine aircraft, can cruise low over water to mask radar returns, and, with the Zero's reach, seems safe over friendly waters near Bougainville. The itinerary is disguised with standard brevity codes. Only a handful of staff know details. They rely on punctuality as a bond. If the Admiral's schedule is tight, security will be tight. Japanese assumptions hinge on several beliefs. First, that Allied land-based fighters on Guadalcanal lack the range to intercept and return with combat fuel. Second, that a light escort of veteran Zero pilots can parry any surprise. Third, that patrol lines and coast watchers will detect any large enemy fighter force. Finally, that speed and discipline, a timed descent into Ballale, Buin around 0945, minimize exposure. On paper, the plan is sound. In practice, it underestimates American SIGINT and the P-38's fuel-to-distance efficiency with dissimilar drop tanks. American design philosophy meets that plan with industrial pragmatism. The Lockheed P-38G is chosen not because it is pretty, but because it can reach. It carries fuel in the fuselage and booms, plus 2 external tanks. Nose-mounted guns, 1620 meters, 20 meters, 4 Erk 50 cal, concentrate fire without convergence guessing. Crucially, big 310-330 U.S. GAL tanks have been flown in from Port Moresby to pair with the standard 165 GAL units, one of each per fighter, giving Mitchell enough to fly $600 a mile out, hold 10-15 minutes over the intercept zone, fight, and fly 400 mi back with a slim reserve. Radios are disciplined. The route avoids Japanese eyes. The organization is equally deliberate. The mission uses 18 aircraft, a kill section of 4 to dive on the bombers and top cover to hold off Zeros. Call signs and contingency splits are briefed. If a pilot's tanks hang up, he aborts his role to avoid drag. Major Mitchell will lead at wave-top height on the outbound dogleg, then climb to an intercept cone timed to the Admiral's descent. The math matters. If Yamamoto's flight is on time, and by reputation it will be, the Bettys appear in the right quadrant at the right minute. The P-38's twin engines also give moral insurance. Single-engine return is possible if one prop is shot away. NHHC, Pacific Rex, Sub2DB, Wikipedia. First contact is an exercise in geometry. Mitchell's force reaches the planned point 1 minute early, 0934 local, just as specks materialize through haze. 2 Bettys in trail, 6 Zeros above and to the side. The P-38's drop tanks, 1 elements won't release. Major Mitchell orders that element to peel and avoid the drag penalty, keeping the plan's shape intact. He then unleashes the attack pair, Lieutenant Rex T. Barber and Lieutenant Thomas G. Lanphier Jr., to slash through the bomber line while top cover engages the escorts. What follows is decisive and brief. Lanphier banks sharply to confront the diving Zero escort, threatening a head-on that breaks their formation as he climbs. Barber pushes low and fast at the lead Betty, the one carrying Yamamoto, getting close enough to aim for the right engine and fuselage. Tracers stitch aluminum. The bomber lurches, then rolls violently left as flames lick the nacelle. Barber nearly collides, knifes past the spinning twin-engine aircraft, and catches a glimpse of a black smoke column rising from the jungle. he assumes the bomber has crashed inland. The second Betty, carrying Ugaki, runs low over the sea, chased first by Lieutenant Besby F. Holmes, whose tanks finally jettison, and Lieutenant Raymond K. Hine. Holmes damages the right engine. Closure speed carries him and Hine through. Barber, turning back at treetop height, finds the wounded aircraft off Moyla Point. His bursts rip panels off. Debris dents his own P-38's gondola and knocks out an intercooler. The Betty settles and ditches into the water. Ugaki and 2 others will surface alive and be rescued. Moments later, Zeros swarm the area. Barber will count 104 bullet holes in his aircraft after landing. Holmes and Barber each claim a 0, though Japanese records list no 0 losses in this specific melee. In the chaos, Lieutenant Hine is singled out. Mitchell later sights him trailing smoke and under attack. Hine's P-38 goes missing over the sea and is presumed lost with the pilot. The top cover sections hold the escorts long enough for the killers to aggress, and Mitchell shepherds the formation on a return leg as taut as the outbound. The ambush window closes almost as soon as it opens. 2 Bettys down, 1 in jungle, 1 in water, 1 U.S. fighter missing. That moment in the trees becomes the turning point of the story's logic. Ground parties will reach the jungle site on 19th of April and find the wreckage of the lead Betty scattered through dense foliage north of Buin. They report the Admiral's body, in uniform, thrown clear yet sitting upright beneath a tree, with 2 wounds, one through the jaw exiting above the right eye, another through the left shoulder, and a white-gloved hand on a sword hilt. A medical examination on 20th of April will rule the head wound fatal. Japanese authorities will suppress the more violent details from the public on orders from above, later wrote biographer Hiroyuki Agawa, managing morale in the face of an operational shock. At sea level, the air battle winds down into fuel and weather. Mitchell's lightnings, each now lightened by jettisoned tanks and consumed fuel, trace a return line of 400 miles. They reappear at Henderson Field, some chewed by cannon shells but intact. The tally is cold. A single-ship ambush executed inside 10 minutes. An adversary fleet commander dead. Ugaki alive to record the horror. Inside the American debrief, a different conflict is born. Who fired the fatal bursts into Yamamoto's Betty? Lanphier submits his claim first. Barber disputes it. Over decades, researchers, pilot testimonies, and flight path reconstructions will tilt credit toward Barber, though official credits long remained split. Modern analyses in service publications now argue the evidence is conclusive for Barber. The controversy lives on as a reminder that humans, not just systems, write the after-action. Behind those few minutes sits a logistics machine. External tanks are not magic. They are mergers of supply chains and aluminum. Guadalcanal had only 165 gal tanks on hand. Larger 310, 330 gal tanks were flown from New Guinea to make the mission's fuel budget close. Armorers checked 20 mm and 50 cal rounds, harmonized guns, and test-fired. Crew chiefs safety-wired the tank pylons so the jettison would be clean. Navigators and pilots computed drift, wind, and time on target, so the formation emerged at precisely the right latitude and minute. Engineers accepted the drag penalty of asymmetrical tanks because the range margin mattered more than handling quirks. Training pipelines fed that confidence. U.S. Army Air Forces pilots in 1943 commonly logged 200-250 flying hours through primary, basic and advanced, with additional time in operational training units. Navy, Marine pilots often logged 300-600 hours by the time they went west, depending on intake wave. These are median ranges. The point is consistency through an industrial training command, not heroic exceptions. Maintenance was similarly routinized. Allison V-1710 engines were serviced by checklists, spares moved by convoy, and squadrons rotated to manage fatigue. The mission's two-tank profile, 330 plus 165 Su Golu, is itself a supply story. There weren't enough big tanks for two per aircraft, so the one of each configuration became doctrine for a day. The intelligence piece is the other half of the machine. U.S. Navy codebreakers at Station HYPO and associated units had penetrated key Japanese naval systems. The Yamamoto itinerary message, the date, time, route, and landing window, was read in time to act. Commanders then insulated the source. To avoid tipping Tokyo to cryptologic penetration, planners built a cover story implying that coast watchers had sighted the formation. The flight path itself, swinging south and west of the normal lane at wave-top height in radio silence, hid from Japanese radar and human eyes. In the air, the P-38's radios existed to solve contingencies, but discipline was the norm. The intercept clock, not the microphone, ran the battle. Ground control and Coast Watch networks threaded the theater. However, Operation Vengeance curated its data to protect SIGINT. Later, after the Admiral's death was announced, U.S. public statements remained sparse. The system guarded its secret because that system, find, fix, finish across oceanic distances, would be used again. There is a human capital gap. 2, measured as hours, repetitions, and crew coordination. Early war Japanese naval aviators were outstanding, with some logging 500 hours pre-combat. By 1943, losses in the Solomons and straightened training pipelines meant replacements arrived with reduced hours, sometimes 150, 250 or less, and shorter gunnery workups. The U.S., conversely, industrialized pilot production while preserving core skills. Even if average pre-deployment hours dipped in late war, gunnery, formation, and instrument time stayed embedded in the curriculum. P-38. Crews had practice in mutual support and energy fighting. They trained to avoid turning duels with the Zero and capitalize on speed and dive performance. In a mission where minutes mattered, that habit of discipline, don't dogfight, achieve the objective, leave, was decisive. Coordination extended to two-ship elements and altitude separation. Mitchell's plan baked in top-cover fences against escort Zeros and a strike vector pinned to Yamamoto's descent. When Holmes's tanks failed to drop, he adapted roles. When Lanphier pulled escort attention, Barber's lane opened. The crew coordination wasn't flawless. Hines' loss is a stark reminder. But the system absorbed friction and still delivered the effect. This was also a doctrine shift, a refusal to fight on the enemy's terms. The Zero's preferred fight in 1942 on 43 was a low-energy turn battle on its side of the speed curve. Mitchell's P-38s did not seek that duel. They used surprise and vertical separation, compressing the engagement into a head-on threat to the escorts and a stern chase on the bombers at treetop level. The P-38's dive speed and fire concentration made short, brutal passes preferable to extended merges. Even after the initial shots, Mitchell's priority was egress on schedule, not trading airplanes to rack up claims. One mission, one target, home. That is doctrine as restraint. There is nuance and counter-evidence worth stating. Pilot claims after the mission included 2 Zeros shot down. Japanese records, however, show no Zeros lost in this specific action, only one damaged. Post-war debates over the Barber versus Lanphier credit reflect fog-of-war geometry and imperfect eyewitness memory. Some narratives mislocated the landing field, Ballale versus Buin, but the intercept window and route alignment meant the plan remained valid regardless. Range figures vary by route estimate. 850 100 Bougainville appears in secondary sources, so using 1,000 Bougainville as a conservative mission profile is prudent. Even the drop tank sizes have minor variance in sources. 310-330 gal cited for the large tank. The operational point stands, 1 large plus 1 small, solved the fuel math. Roll the numbers up, Without romance, U.S. Force 18, P-38G, C-13th F-347th FG, Corps 339th FS. Armed with 120 mm Ma plus 4X Favri Kali, carrying 330 plus 165 gal external tanks per aircraft. Japanese formation, 2 XG-4M1 bombers, 705th Kokutai, plus 6 SIDAG A6M3 escorts, 204th Kokutai. Timeline: Depart Rabaul 06 V Zeros, intercept 09340936. Planned landing 9.45. Losses: Japan 2. Bettys destroyed 19 to 20 KIA including Yamamoto, US 1 P-38. Rate lost: Lieutenant Raymond K. Hine, KIA. Distance flown 600 metered outbound dogleg, plus 400 meters return. 1,000 meters mission profile. Fueling solution: mixed tanks due to limited big tank supply. Large tanks flown in from New Guinea. Claims versus records: U.S. pilots claimed additional fighters. Japanese records show no zeros lost. Shooter credit: official credits split. Later analyses assign Yamamoto Betty to Rex Barber with high confidence. In terms of ratios, the exchange rate is stark at the mission level. 2 twin-engine bombers destroyed for 1 fighter lost. Not a typical metric. But in value terms, the asymmetry is strategic. Time on station was 10 to 15 minutes. Total flight time 5 to 6 hours, depending on winds and climbs. The probability of intercept hinged on punctuality. Yamamoto's reputation for exact timing increased the intercept success odds. Psychology mattered. Japanese naval personnel received the news days later, after the body's cremation and public ceremony. Details were managed to avoid panic. Diaries and staff notes from the period describe shock and a sense that luck had turned in the South Pacific. The U.S. side experienced a mirror image. Morale jump. A sense that intelligence and reach could pluck a decisive figure from the sky. In operational memos, commanders emphasized secrecy around source use. Public versions foregrounded coast watchers and patrol luck to protect code breaking. The ambush also cautioned Japanese commanders about travel exposure and may have induced greater centralization at Rabaul, just as the Allies built pressure along the new Georgia-Bougainville axis. The Lanphier-Barber dispute added a human coda in America. Articles, reunions, affidavits, and eventual state-level recognitions adjusting awards to reflect shared or reassigned credit. It reminds us that even a perfectly timed intercept leaves imperfect paperwork, and that professional pride survives the war. In the 3 to 12 months after April 18, 1943, multiple lines converge. Admiral Minichi Koga replaces Yamamoto. Japanese naval air continues to bleed in the Central Solomons. The Allies prosecute Cartwheel, isolating Rabaul with air and sea power, while the new Georgia and Bougainville campaigns erode remaining forward bases. The psychological effect of Yamamoto's death is hard to quantify, but the loss of a charismatic, strategically flexible commander aligns with a year in which Japanese initiative contracts. On the Allied side, Long Reach Plus, Clean Intel Plus specialized aircraft becomes a template. Use P-38s and, later, long-leg fighters and bombers to make distance a weapon. Operationally, Operation Vengeance does not end a war. It accelerates trends. Japanese escorts are still lethal in local fights. Allied units still pay in pilots and machines. But the admixture of range, timing, and codes foreshadows 1944-45 patterns. Ever deeper strikes, GCI radar guidance matured, and leadership targets attacked when exposed. A neutral ethics note belongs here. Targeting a named commander is lawful under the laws and customs of war when he is a combatant traveling to operational bases. Yamamoto was not a civilian, not hors de combat, and not protected by parley. Yet targeted killing carries moral weight. It aims at a mind as much as a machine, and it turns intelligence into a death warrant. The Americans shielded code-breaking by deception. The Japanese managed grief by suppressing details. The war system rewards such choices, but societies must live with them afterward. The duty is to recount the facts without glee, and to remember that each figure on a loss list is also a family's forever empty chair. Post-war legacy and doctrine emerge in several threads. First, the system beats spirit lesson. Punctuality and daring are assets, but against a network of SIGINT, logistics, and specialized aircraft, they can become liabilities. Second, range as a weapon. The P-38's mixed tank solution anticipates later practices. External tanks as mission enablers on P-51s, F-6Fs, and post-war jets. Third, kill chain secrecy matters. The careful cover stories around Operation Vengeance prefigure modern classification around signal sources. Finally, the aftershocks ripple in training and command culture. U.S. forces double down on standardization, and Japanese forces, constrained by industry and fuel, struggle to replace their pre-war elite with equally seasoned aviators. The myth versus method conversation also matures. For decades, tale-telling foregrounded the duel. Fast planes, personal heroism. Modern historiography refocuses on process. Who found the message? Who flew the tanks in? Who did the math? It is not that heroism disappears. It becomes one component in a chain of find, fix, finish, exploit, analyze. And so we return to the opening image. A bomber's shadow scuds over Bougainville's canopy. A watch hand clicks toward Aero 945. The metaphor here is not lightning, despite the airplane's name. It is a ledger. On April 18, 1943, the U.S. balanced a ledger that had been in red since December 1941, using gallons, minutes, and miles. The jungle answered with smoke. The math closed. And in that space where a punctual man believed in schedule and honor, a system that prized timing and reach wrote its verdict in the sky.